Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective, where we bring you detailed analysis of key national and international issues. Today we're going to talk about the Quad leaders meeting in Tokyo. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi participated in the second in-person Quad leaders summit in Tokyo on Tuesday, along with his Japanese and Australian counterpart and US President Joe Biden. This was the fourth interaction of the leaders since their first virtual meeting in March 2021. The leaders reiterated their shared commitment to a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific and the importance of upholding the principle of sovereignty, territorial integrity and peaceful resolution of disputes. They exchanged perspectives on development in the Indo-Pacific and the conflict in Europe, and also took stock of the ongoing Quad collaborations and their vision for the future. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, on his part, highlighted India's consistent and principled position on the need for cessation of hostilities, resumption of dialogue and diplomacy. He also emphasized the importance of delivering on Quad's positive and constructive agenda and show tangible benefits for the region. Today, we will discuss and analyze all the aspects of this Quad leaders meeting and, of course, the road ahead for Quad. And for more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Let me first introduce them to you. Beginning with, we have with us in the studio Dr. Shriram Cholia joining us. He's a foreign affairs expert. We're also joined by retired Major General Dhruv C. Katoch, Director of India Foundation, and former Ambassador Deepa Gopalan Wadhwa is also joining us. She's been India's ambassador to Japan. Welcome, both of you as well, to Sansad TV. I'll begin with you, Dr. Cholia, and let's first start by quickly summarizing the road so far in terms of the Quad leaders meeting which we have witnessed, and also, key tangible outcomes vis-a-vis this leaders meeting which took place in Tokyo.
Vishal, we are making a lot of progress on multiple legs. There's been a push for infrastructure. Now there has been an announcement for $50 billion funding for the next 5 years to beef up physical and digital infrastructure in the entire region. Because this was one area where, the Chinese dominance was quite perceptible, and many smaller countries did not have options and choices. So now Quad is very clearly coming forward on this front, because we realize that, Chinese power is through creep. It's not like all at once. So it's not a very crude one. They have a military dimension, but they also use loans and debt in the name of infrastructure to try and capture strategic real estate in the whole region. So now I think we are trying to put a break on it and saying there is another game in town, and it is called Quad. That's one. The other thing is we have announced a new maritime surveillance mechanism and monitoring. And this is going to be a naval thing among 4 member countries. And we hope to also involve Pacific Island nations, ASEAN countries, the other big stakeholders in the Indo-Pacific region, and who are not Quad members, but who are now, many of them have joined this new initiative, what President Biden calls the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework.
IPF.
India was present at the foundation of it. And in a way, Quad is going to be driving this IPF agenda forward also. So I think on all those fronts, there have been, new developments. The old ones, the existing one, the vaccine delivery and clean energy, all those projects also, I think we are giving a boost, thrust with new financing mechanisms and new efforts to pool all our resources together. This is a plurilateral initiative, like 4 countries. So naturally, they have to bring all the resources together. And on the military front, I would say that the warning has gone out. They have said categorically, Quad leaders said in the statement that we oppose unilaterally redrawing boundaries by force and changing status quo by force, especially in Indo-Pacific. So what we're trying to say is it's not only what Russia has done in Europe. Our concern is this region. And I think in that sense, the whole focus of the international community, with Biden being present and meeting with with his 2 major allies, Australia and Japan, and the major defense partner, India, what we are saying is that we have a plan now going forward, and we are putting some concrete measures in place, new initiatives, and also trying to draw in the whole region together in some kind of a collective security architecture. That's something I see emerging out of these new summits and the new announcements.
General Katoch, I'd like to bring you in here, and given the present, geopolitical situation, the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict as well, of course, a lot of perspectives change and focus areas also go under change. In this scenario, a few key words when we are talking about Quad and we are talking about Quad Leaders Summit is, of course, the issue of regional security, the issue of free and open Indo-Pacific, issue of respecting territorial integrity, and as Prime Minister Modi underlined, cessation of hostilities and using diplomacy.
Vishal, I think in my personal view, this particular Quad meeting being set in the backdrop of the ongoing war in Ukraine assumes great significance. Now, why it assumes significance is because India has not taken any particular side, either with the Russians or with the Americans, as far as the war is concerned. We have maintained a neutral stance, and to a very large extent, the Western democracies and the US in particular have been a bit rattled by this. So now with the Quad coming in, I think India has laid down its priorities very, very clearly, especially because the Indo-Pacific is going to be the real theater of concern. Now, the way we have looked upon it is that the war in Ukraine, I've always looked upon it as a regional war. It has something to do with Europe. But anything which happens in the Indo-Pacific, it has got worldwide repercussions. And this is something which India can ill afford to have, because any repercussions in the Indo-Pacific will directly impinge upon India's national security concerns, most especially on our energy requirements. So when we are looking at this particular situation, India has made it very clear, in fact, especially the Indian Prime Minister has made it very clear, when he talks about, when the key phrase words are used is free and open. Now, when we talk of free and open Indo-Pacific and inclusive, the third word used is inclusive. Now, it means that nobody can alter the status quo. And this is what China has been attempting to do for a very long time. I think the second message which has gone across is do not take unilateral actions the way Russia has taken in Ukraine. So if China attempts to do any action on Taiwan, there are going to be very severe consequences.
Okay.
And I think the Chinese realize the consequences, because an attempted invasion will most likely result in the defeat of the Chinese forces. The Chinese, I think, are cognizant of the fact and perhaps won't go that route now. So I think it's very clearly now what is being said as far as the security agenda is concerned is very clear messaging, the way I put it is.
Okay.
It is very clear messaging to all parties. Listen, let us work together. But if you can't work together, then do not try to alter the status quo by force.
Okay.
And this is where India, I think, will play a very, very important role in the security domain in the coming years.
Okay.
Vishal.
That's of course a very important aspect, security there. But let's also look at the diplomacy part, and I'd like to bring in Mr. Wadhwa here. Mr. Wadhwa, these four countries coming together, in the form of Quad, and you've been India's representative with Japan. Of course, we would like to know the areas of convergence vis-a-vis India and Japan, and on a larger platform like Quad, but also with specific interest towards Indo-Pacific here.
Well, this is a really very important partnership between these four countries. As we all know, it started with, I think, the tsunami in about 2004 didn't really have much of a life of its own. But in 2017, it started, at the official level, and suddenly we find in 2 years that we have 4 summits. So you look at the pace of progress of this grouping. And what brings us all together is that we're democracies. We believe in certain principles. I think you've spoken about the principles that we speak about. And what we have decided is that there's a lot of disruption in the world, a lot of challenges, and that we need to work together. We need to work together for the peace and the prosperity and stability of the Indo-Pacific, but also among ourselves and with partner countries. And I think what has happened at this particular Quad meeting is this emphasis of the areas. Of course, we knew earlier there were about 6 areas which had been demarcated. This provided an opportunity for us to sit together, for the 4 countries to sit together and to look at what has happened. For example, in terms of the COVID vaccine, they have been able to get that off the ground very successfully. And in fact, there have been about 265 million doses, I believe, of the COVID vaccine, which have reached the Indo-Pacific countries. So, there are tangible outcomes from these areas where we want to cooperate. And we want to really widen these areas and deepen these areas of cooperation. And therefore, Mr. Cholia mentioned this very important thing for infrastructure investment, because we're looking at the needs and the gaps in financing. So that has been a very important area. Another very important decision which has come out of this is something called QChat. And QChat is what are we going to do on climate change in terms of adaptation and mitigation? Because this is, of course, an issue which affects not only the Quad countries, not only it's associated with clean energy, it's associated with food security, water security, but also it affects the Pacific Island countries. And I think this Quad meeting has tried to look at the concerns and the vulnerabilities of the Pacific Island countries and try to reassure them and say that we will reach out to you and we will be there to assist you in different areas.
Okay.
Another important outcome of this has been, which was mentioned, was this partnership for maritime domain awareness. And this, again, I mean, it's not a security grouping, but, there is certainly, there are elements which are very close to, to security issues. For example, in this, we will be looking at not only HADR, which is, of course, to do with humanitarian aid during disasters, but also illegal fishing in that entire area. Illegal fishing is something, and we know who does most of the illegal fishing in the part of the Indo-Pacific. But here we have countries getting together. We have these fusion centers who will be exchanging information, and satellite information will be exchanged. So I think we are moving much closer into something which is has much more of a form, is tangible, is looking at outcomes. So the credibility of this will be higher. And I must say one last thing, is that we're also looking at institutionalization in the sense that we're saying that these summits will happen with regularity, or the ministers will meet with regularity. So now this port very clearly is there to stay.
Okay.
And this, I think, is really my takeaway from this port summit.
Indeed, it is there to stay. And the concretization, the shaping of forms of various institutions and the way we are moving ahead is also really important. Dr. Cholia, Prime Minister in his remarks mentioned a few things. And the one aspect which we would like to understand is when he mentioned that, the Quad should show tangible benefits for the region or for the countries in the region and work on the positive and the constructive agenda. So what is he referring to in terms of the tangible benefits for the region? Of course, there are various areas on which the cooperation is being talked about, as all three of you mentioned. But specifically when we're talking about tangible outcomes, and that too, of course, these nations in the Indo-Pacific would want to see some results and see them quickly.
Yeah, I think what he's talking about is that this is a multi-dimensional partnership. It's not only a military, and because some of the ASEAN countries were a little bit wary of associating with Quad because they thought it could be just a military alliance that may entangle them or may squeeze them in between China and the US alliance system. So I think what we're trying to show them now, and there's been a lot of disappointment about the US pulling out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, not being involved in the economic needs and development of the peoples of this region, which was making it the leveling the playing field for clearing it off for the Chinese to come in and dominate. So I think what we are now trying to do is touch the lives of ordinary people. A lot of these Indo-Pacific countries have been named by the UN recently as highly vulnerable for food, energy, and financial crisis because of the double whammy of the pandemic as well as the Russia-Ukraine war, inflation and all kinds of pressures. So some of these countries, we've already seen what happened to Sri Lanka. So I think there is a real fear of instability in a lot of these countries. And that's why Quad are saying that collectively, we are more capable countries, we are relatively stable countries with good economic management and we have resources. We're going to pool all those and we are going to try and shore up some of these vulnerable countries. So I think finding some role model countries which could be weaned away from this debt trap.
Okay.
I think Sri Lanka is ideal because already they are suffering as a result of the Chinese neo-colonial attitudes and intentions there. So likewise in the Pacific Islands, Australia has been very worried about Solomon. Solomon Islands has recently signed a security pact with China, which would bring their navy and their police onto the...
and in fact, the Chinese foreign minister is going to be on a visit in Solomon Islands.
So, and the Australians have been very worried about it because historically that's been their sphere of influence. Historically, Indian Ocean region, we don't want Chinese to come. So I think what we are trying to tell these countries is, because they always ask us, okay, you are the alternative to China, what can you give us, right? Both the elites and the ordinary people. Indeed. So now we are saying, we've got this whole bunch of ideas and projects, concrete projects that we can implement on the ground for connectivity, for trade, for industrialization, for transportation, for green energy and disaster resilient infrastructure. That's another big idea of the Prime Minister, which has been adopted by all the other Quad countries. So I think those things will ultimately win over these countries, because right now, at least for the last 10 years, before Quad came to being, China was like, monopolizing that space, saying that we are the main partner for development. Now we are saying there are other alternatives and we can do it. And I think the last point I want to make, Vishal, is we are also trying to say that democracies can deliver. This is Biden's big thing, Whether he can deliver is a different matter, but collectively we are trying. And what we are saying is the Chinese model, they were saying, is far superior, far faster, more efficient. You want $10 billion? I'll just write out a check and give it to you right now. You build your bridge or you build your railway line. Now we are saying we are also going to bring in money. We are also going to bring in expertise. We're going to make you climate resilient. Most of these island countries are highly vulnerable, as Ambassador was mentioning.
But in a more democratic and structured manner.
And in a consultative way, where the local people have a say. Because what the Chinese are doing is they usually buy up the elites, and then there's grassroots backlash against them, like we are seeing now in Sri Lanka. So I think now we are basically approaching this as if we can provide an alternative model to this Beijing consensus. It is no longer Washington consensus. That is the old idea of US dominant. Now the US has realized alone it cannot counter China in Asia. So now it's going to be it's going to be a democratic exercise with 4, 5 or 6 or 7. Quad plus is not a reality yet, but I believe through this Indo-Pacific economic framework, it will be a de facto Quad plus that is coming to being, and that will show the power of multilateralism and democracy. Ultimately, we want democratic forms of governance, both domestically within countries and also in conduct, in international relations. Authoritarian states cannot be trusted. Indeed. To be democratic in their conduct.
Indeed, and economic situation is something which every country would like to be in the pink of its health there when you talk about economy. But coming back to security, General Katoch, and one aspect of security in this particular region is, of course, cyber security, and a lot is being talked about, discussed and decided and focused upon when we're talking about cyber security. How do you analyze Quad's movement on this aspect? Because vis-a-vis China, this also is a very important angle to take care of.
Vishal, I think this is going to be one of the most important aspects as we move into the future. If you are, just to take your mind back to what has happened in the war in the Ukraine, a very large part of the hits which the Russians took was because of breaches in security on the cyber domain. And this was made possible really due to the complete surveillance of the battlefield area by American satellites and their ability to pass on this information to the Ukrainians in real time. This also resulted in the sinking of the Moskva, which while the ship was sunk by the Ukrainians, the intelligence was certainly provided by the Russians. Now, when we're looking into the field of cybersecurity, basically it is our ability to keep our own information secure through various means, and the ability to disrupt the enemies. Now, this is going to find an increasing traction as far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned, and it will be one of the major highlights as far as the 4 Quad countries are concerned as they move into the future. Now, one of the aspects of the, when we are looking at Quad as a quasi-military alliance per se, it is not a military alliance, but as their ability to get together to coordinate on military affairs. This aspect of cybersecurity assumes a very critical significance because you need similar protocols. We need to be able to communicate with each other in a very secure and stable manner. So increasingly, how this is going to come about and how the 4 Quad countries will do it, and then continue with this effort with the Quad Plus as and when it comes about, I think is going to be critical. The second aspect which I want to talk about security, which I didn't mention in my first thing, is what the ambassador referred to as far as the fusion centers are concerned. Now, the fusion center is located in Gurgaon, and all the member countries have their representatives there. Now, in real time, each one of them has a very clear navigational picture as to which are the white ships sailing on the sea. Now, the white ships are the ones who have got their declared flags. So, if there is any black ship activity that is undisclosed, that of course is not reflected. but all white ship activity is reflected. And this is a tremendous intelligence picture. So when more and more countries get into the fusion center, the complete mapping as far as the Indo-Pacific can be made very, very transparent to all the member countries.
Okay.
And once that is so, then aspects like illegal fishing and all that, it can be handled in a much faster and with a much swifter response time.
Okay.
In the event of hostilities, of course, it gives the user nations the ability to avoid neutral targets or friendly targets. And then you can actually put your attention.
Indeed, the maritime domain awareness, the MDA, and the cybersecurity aspect are really important cornerstones of the security, process when we're talking about here. Let me bring in Ambassador Wadhwa again here. Ambassador Wadhwa, if we're trying to understand, and before we bring this discussion to an end, the Chinese angle, as all three of you were mentioning, one, how crucial it is to all three other Quad members. Of course, from India's perspective, it becomes really important and really crucial here as well. But from the perspective of Japan, Australia and US as well, and the way, diplomacy is also being used. Of course, all other aspects, economy, security will be really important.
Yes, we have seen Chinese reaction in the last few weeks, and it's always been there. They first said that Quad would be a new NATO, and, this whole sort of making a sort of demonizing of the Quad. So as I said, I think we taken pains, including our foreign minister, to say, our external affairs minister, to say it is not a security grouping, certainly not. But as I again mentioned earlier, I mean, it does have security implications, I'm sure, and as Jen Katoch has also mentioned. But the Chinese are seeing what is happening in the sense that there have been issues in the region. The Quad getting together actually offers options to the countries of the region of cooperating with perhaps a group of countries which is far more, believes in the UN system, in the international rule-based order, which is really important. And for them also, if you look at the countries of the region, it's good to have more options. I mean, you have the Chinese who are there, but even if you look at the Pacific Island states, but here you have another group of countries who are very keen to be there. So you actually have a greater choice of options in terms of the Chinese on one side as well as the others. So it's not going to be either or. I think it's going to be both. And the Chinese, as you can see, that they've just had this BRI and they've had the run of the place for such a long time. And now to see 4 countries that are very purposefully coming together in areas of critical importance. And I must say that Prime Minister Modi, I remember Shangri-La, was very important for him to say that this would have to be an inclusive architecture. It was an inclusive organization. So we haven't said we're going to leave anybody out. But obviously, China sees that these are the principles which certainly they fall by, which they cannot live by. And I must say in this core document, though there is no mention of either Russia in the context of Ukraine or China, but it's very clear that there are references to China when they talk about the East and the South China Sea. And, the recently that they have tried to go in and do some, exploitation for gas in a region which is, which they share the EZ with Japan. And this is the face of earlier agreements. So the point is that we're dealing with a country that does not believe in any existing agreements that are there, does not respect them. And I think here, when we talk about a rule-based order, what we're doing is we're also challenging that. Okay.
And that becomes really important. Quick concluding comments from you, Dr. Cholia, before we bring this discussion to an end.
Vishal, the thing is, Quad is really calling a spade now. There's no ambiguity left, total strategic clarity. They have said we are against militarization of disputed territories. They even said we are against maritime militias. This is what China is doing. They're using their coast guard. They're using swarming tactics. Then their navy comes in to then shoo away the Filipinos or the Vietnamese and whoever else they have disputes, or the Taiwanese. So now we are saying that this kind of gangsterism in the high seas is not going to be acceptable. Now the proof of the pudding is in eating, and we have to implement a lot of these tough talk. So going forward, before the next summit, a lot more maritime coordination will also be necessary apart from the economy. So economy and security, the 2 pillars, good progress, but much more to be done.
We'll have to go hand in hand. There it is. Thank you so much, Dr. Cholia, General Katoch, as well as Mr. Wadhwa for sharing your views and insight. As our experts were pointing out, all these important aspects of the Quad leaders meeting in Tokyo, and of course the overall Quad initiative and the road ahead on various aspects of this initiative and what it means for these countries which lie in the Indo-Pacific region. We'll come back again with all the details and with a new topic as well. Till then, keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you.